You ever notice how some people just never complain? Like, the building could be on fire and they'd calmly grab a fire extinguisher without saying a word. Chances are, you're looking at someone from Generation X. And there's a psychological reason they're wired this way that almost nobody talks about. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, is probably the most psychologically misunderstood group of people alive today. We obsess over boomers. We analyze millennials to death. Gen Z gets picked apart like some exotic new species. But Gen X? They're just there. Quiet. Competent. Almost invisible. And that invisibility isn't an accident. It's a survival strategy that got hardwired into their brains during childhood. And understanding why reveals something pretty uncomfortable about what happens when an entire generation of kids raises itself. Picture this. It's 1978. You're 8 years old. You walk up to your front door after school, pull out the key hanging around your neck, and let yourself into an empty house. The silence hits you first. No voices. No movement. Just you. Both your parents are at work. There's no cell phone to call them. No Ring camera so they can check you're safe. No text saying, I'm home. You're just alone. So you make yourself a snack, sit down at the kitchen table, do your homework by yourself and wait. By 1984, around 7 million kids between ages 5 and 13 were doing this exact thing every single day. That's not a few latchkey kids here and there. That's an entire generation learning a very specific lesson before their brains were even fully developed. The lesson? You're on your own. Figure it out. Now, you might think, okay, so they were independent kids. Big deal. But here's what actually happens psychologically. When you're a child and you come home to an empty house day after day, your brain doesn't just learn self-reliance. It learns that other people won't always be there when you need them. And more than that, it learns that you'd better not need them in the first place. Because needing someone who isn't there doesn't just feel disappointing. Feels dangerous. So your brain adapts. It stops expecting help. It stops reaching out. It builds walls that look like independence but are actually just protection. When their parents did come home, Gen X knew exactly where they stood. The rules were simple and the consequences were immediate. You didn't get a conversation about your feelings. You didn't get a timeout to think about what you did. You stepped out of line and you paid for it right then and there. No negotiations. No second chances. Psychologists call this a high contingency environment, where actions and outcomes are directly linked without any buffer. Your brain learned to predict consequences in real time, to think 3 steps ahead, to calculate risk before making a move. Because if you screwed up, there was no one coming to save you from it. This is why Gen X has this weird ability to see disaster coming from a mile away. They're not psychic. They're just conditioned. Their brains spent decades in an environment where you survived by reading the room, predicting outcomes, and never ever assuming things would work out fine. Then there's what they watched their parents do. Gen X grew up hearing all the usual promises. Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Stay loyal to your company and they'll take care of you. Marriage is forever. The system works if you follow the rules. And then they watched those promises fall apart in real time. Divorce rates exploded through the 70s and 80s. Their parents gave everything to companies that handed out pink slips the moment profits dipped. The rules their parents followed didn't protect anyone. The game just changed and nobody got a heads up. So when psychologists label Gen X as having defensive pessimism, they're kind of missing the point. Gen X isn't pessimistic. They're realistic. They hope for good things, sure. But deep down, they're always braced for the rug to get pulled out, because that's exactly what kept happening. It's not cynicism. It's pattern recognition. And honestly, they've been right more often than they've been wrong. Here's where it gets even more interesting. This is a huge part of why you barely see them on social media. It's not that they don't understand technology. Gen X built the internet. They were the first people online. They just grew up in a world where privacy was normal and mistakes stayed private. When you messed up as a kid, maybe 5 people knew about it and that was the end of it. No cameras. No screenshots. No permanent digital record of your worst moments. The idea of voluntarily broadcasting your life to strangers doesn't feel exciting to them. Feels insane. Why would you give the world ammunition? Why would you make yourself that visible, that vulnerable? They learned early that the less people know about you, the safer you are. Gen X basically weaponized sarcasm and detachment as emotional armor. Make a joke before someone else can. Keep it light. Laugh it off before it hurts. You can trace this directly back to their childhoods. They grew up during the Cold War when teachers casually discussed nuclear annihilation like it was just another weather pattern. Duck and cover drills in elementary school, as if a wooden desk would protect you from a nuclear blast. Adults told them the world might end at any moment, but also not to worry about it. So they learned to hold two completely contradictory ideas in their heads at the same time. They learned that caring too much about anything just sets you up to get hurt. So keep some distance. Stay ironic. Don't let anyone see that you're taking it seriously. But here's the paradox. Despite all of this, Gen X developed one of the strongest work ethics of any generation alive. They just don't talk about it. They don't post motivational quotes about grinding. They don't make LinkedIn content about their wins. They just show up and do the work. This got forged early through jobs that seem almost prehistoric now. Paper routes at 5 in the morning in the freezing cold. Bagging groceries. Working cash registers where you had to calculate change in your head when the machine broke. These weren't resume builders or networking opportunities. They were raw, unfiltered introductions to the adult world, where a 12-year-old could be solely responsible for delivering news to an entire neighborhood. No supervisión. No safety net. Just you and the job. They watched their parents get destroyed by corporate downsizing and restructuring. So they never believed in company loyalty. But they're insanely loyal to their own competence. They know they can't control whether they'll get laid off. But they can control whether they're the most valuable, most skilled person in the room when the layoffs come. So they quietly make themselves indispensable. Not for recognition, for survival. And here's the paradox that defines Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most independent generation and the most quietly collaborative. They will never ask for help. They'll figure it out themselves. They've been doing that since they were 8 years old. But if you need help, they'll show up without drama, without fanfare, without posting about it later. This comes from forming incredibly tight bonds with friends out of pure necessity when their parents weren't around. They learned that you don't advertise your loyalty. You just live it. Their relationship with authority is equally complicated. They respect competence, not titles. If you've earned your position through actual skill and knowledge, they'll follow you anywhere. But if you're just someone with a fancy job title who clearly doesn't know what they're doing, they have absolutely zero patience. Gen X questions authority not because they're rebellious, but because they watched incompetent authority figures make catastrophic decisions their entire childhood. Watergate. Ir en contra. The AIDS crisis fumbled by officials who prioritized politics over people. They learned that the people in charge are often just winging it, and titles don't mean much if you can't back them up with real competence. Economically, Gen X got hammered over and over again. The youngest ones graduated college right into the dot-com crash. The oldest ones were hitting their professional stride when the 2008 financial crisis destroyed everything. They've been economically traumatized repeatedly, which is why so many of them have multiple income streams. Not because they're naturally entrepreneurial, but because they learned that nothing lasts. One job isn't enough. One source of income isn't safe. You diversify because you've watched stability disappear overnight too many times. But all of this self-reliance comes with a cost. Gen X struggles with something researchers have identified as self-reliance that borders on pathological. They're incredibly capable in a crisis. Almost too capable. Because that capability comes from an absolute unwillingness to depend on anyone else. Studies show that Gen Zers report significantly lower levels of seeking social support during stressful periods. Not because they don't have people they could ask, but because asking feels like failure, feels like admitting you can't handle it, and they've spent their entire lives proving they can handle it. This self-reliance even shaped how they process information. Before the internet made everything instantly searchable, knowledge had weight. Gen X spent hours in libraries, flipping through card catalogs, hunting for one specific book that might contain the answer they needed. Information required effort. It had a physical cost. And because of that, what they learned stuck differently. Psychologists call this deeper encoding. When you have to work hard to find information, your brain integrates it more permanently. It becomes part of you in a way that Googling something never will. They learn to fix things with their hands because that's just what you did. Your bike chain slipped, you flipped it upside down, got grease all over your hands and figured it out. The TV flickered, you didn't call a technician. You grabbed a screwdriver and opened it up. This built something deeper than just skills. It built a belief that with enough patience and the right tools, you could master the physical world. That nothing was unfixable if you were willing to put in the time. Now they're raising kids in a completely different universe. A world with helicopter parents and constant supervision and every moment documented on social media. They gave their kids the attention and presence they never had. But sometimes they wonder if they've made them too soft, too dependent, too visible. Because in the Gen X worldview, being visible means being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is dangerous. The truth is, Generation X might be the last generation that truly understands what it means to be alone with your thoughts. To be bored and have to entertain yourself. To solve problems without instantly searching for the answer. They're not better than other generations. Just different. Shaped by a specific moment in history when the old world was dying but the new one hadn't been born yet. They're the bridge. And bridges don't get much attention. They're just there, doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all. Not caring if anyone notices. Not needing the recognition. Just quietly being competent while the world moves around them. If you've ever felt like you had to figure everything out on your own, or if you recognize these patterns in yourself or someone you know, you're not alone in seeing it. This channel breaks down human behavior in ways that actually make sense. No academic nonsense. No fluff. Just real psychology explained like a real conversation. So if that's valuable to you, go ahead and subscribe. Because understanding why people are the way they are, that's how you start understanding yourself. And that matters more than most people realize.